Hey everyone, welcome to ioby's webinar. Is a picture worth $1,000? We're gonna just wait. We've got some folks still arriving. We're probably gonna wait another minute or so before we kick things off. So thanks everyone for joining us on this Monday webinar for remembering about things that happen on a Monday. We've got a great lineup today, talking about photography and images as a way to compel audiences and get folks to donate. So hopefully this will be a topic that y'all find useful. We'll just give it another minute. We're seeing people trickle in, and then we will kick it off with our panelists. Seeing just a few more people trickle in. We're going to give it another minute or so, and then we will kick off this topic about photography and fundraising, photography and storytelling, photography and movement building. We've got some great stories to share today, and hopefully it'll be a useful topic for everyone. All right, we'll give it like one more minute. The old pre-webinar stall for time. Keep on talking. If folks are joining us for the first time, ioby does a series of national learning webinars featuring folks from our community who have used the ioby platform to fundraise for their own projects and to build their own movements locally. We try to do about one of these a month, and we're actually going to be ramping them up next year in 2020. So if you haven't already signed up for our newsletter at ioby.org, that's the best way to find out about future webinars. And we have a whole bunch of super interesting topics coming up in the next year. Things around fundraising and movement building and organizing, and it really ranges from the kind of like big topic like civic engagement stuff to the really tactical and stuff more like taking pictures and using them. So we're super excited about things that we have coming up, and it's a really good way just to kind of hear from folks in our community. So ioby is not just always the one doing the talking. So we like them. Cool. Why don't we get started? It's about 1:03. We will still have some folks trickling in, but I think we should get started with introductions. We are very excited, like I said, about this topic. ioby has worked with thousands of local leaders around the country for the last 10 years, and we often find that the projects that are the most successful with quickly getting to their fundraising goals and getting momentum and making a big impact are the ones that have the best visuals. So we're talking today about how to create visuals that are memorable, how to use them. We're hearing not just from ioby ourselves, but from 3 of our project leaders that have recently run fundraising campaigns with us, who have been successful at using the power of photography and video and imagery in reaching their fundraising goals. So yeah, I think without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to the 3 panelists to each say a few words about their projects, just so we're all on the same page about kind of what folks were fundraising for. And then we'll hear briefly from Farrah, one of our success strategists here at ioby, just about sort of how ioby works with folks, just so we have a little bit of grounding. And then we'll open it up for questions. So I have some questions prepared. Hopefully folks who are joining us on this webinar brought some questions with you. We'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. And we'll just have a discussion. Cool. So why don't I turn it over first to Matt to talk about your project and introduce yourself. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me on this webinar. So yeah, my name is Matt Kelly. I am an independent journalist / storyteller. I have written for, I don't know, a series of publications. I've actually been working most closely with my local newspaper covering topics locally, which has been really exciting. But as part of the sort of science freelancing that I do, about 2 years ago, I came across this story about the bees of Grand Staircase-Escalante, which is, just to cover some ground in case people don't know, is a national monument out along the southern border of Utah, which is vast and huge and pristine and primitive and just probably, dare I say, the most beautiful place on earth. And I happened to come across this bit of data that there are almost as many bees in this desert environment, in this one little monument that's about the size of Delaware, as there are in the entire eastern United States, east of the Mississippi. It's just an incredible hotspot of bee diversity. So my nerdy brain started wanting to do a story on this. I started doing that. Our current president took office, and then shortly after that decided to slash the size of the monument in one of the largest reductions of public lands in American history, maybe the largest one. And so the story I was working on took a whole new direction, which was what will happen to the bees as a representative of biodiversity in this amazing place. And working on that story eventually came to the idea of doing a documentary film. So not just a print story, not just photographs, not just visuals, but an actual documentary film. And that's what I ended up raising $28,000 through ioby to do.
All right, great. Thank you, Matt. Let's turn it over to Ben to talk about your project.
Whoops. Yes, that's me. That's not the description under my name isn't, but that's okay. If that is me, and on the left, I guess, because the right is a llama. There you go. So Backpacktacular. So I'm a co-founder of a local organization here in Detroit, the actual most beautiful place in the world. I guess we can, reasonable minds can differ about that. The called Summer in the City. And Summer in the City, we just wrapped up our 18th summer. One of the things we've been doing for a long time, it's a kind of a season of service model. So somewhere in between, like a make a difference day and a city year, we have summer break when high school and college and elementary school students are out of school and the weather's good and the days are long, and we paint, plant, and play for 8 weeks, murals, gardens, and camp, kids, youth enrichment programming, and then it all culminates finale Friday in mid-August, and the ioby part of that for a good few 5 years now has been the Backpacktacular. So all of our campers and a bunch of elementary age, some pre-K, some middle school students from all over the city come, and it's like a carnival and a fair and fun and it's sort of a part of the transition or anticipating the transition back into the new academic year, which in Detroit is in a lot of places can be rather fraught. We have the Backpacktacular, so kids get a backpack when they get there, and then they get to fill it with stuff over the course of the day, school supplies and books and their crafts and buttons and things that they make there, and then almost all of them take them with. There's always a few out of 3 out of 800 that get orphaned at the site, but they get kids, as you can see in the picture, as we'll talk about, get excited about it, give them a good home, and hopefully serve them well in their new school year. So that is the Backpacktacular.
Awesome, thank you, Ben. And Cappy, go ahead.
Hi, folks. I'm Dr. Cappy Collins. Thanks for having me today. I run a program called Paso here in East Harlem in New York City. Paso, on the face of it, is a walking program, and we certainly do walk. But if you look under the hood, what's going on is more of a resource utilization project for families who live in East Harlem. Basically, we conduct multiple needs assessments to ask families, hey, what do you need to take care of the things that you think are important? And we structure walks around connecting people with those needs. We've been going about 7 years, and we had a recent ioby campaign that raised about $10,000 to help us with sustainability for that program. A couple of our participants.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for the intros. I should say also, I should have said earlier, but we will have time for some audience questions. So Jot down questions as you come up with them. You can type them into the little thing that says questions in this side of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be getting to as many of those as we can. So you don't need to wait. Put them in whenever you want. Awesome. We are going to hear now from Farah, one of our leader success strategists who works with folks like Matt, Cappy, and Ben to help them with fundraising success. So go ahead, Farah.
Hi, everyone. So I'm hoping that you are inspired by some of the images that have been shared and some of the stories that have been shared. And part of my role at ioby is not only to be inspired by these awesome individuals, but is also to help you leverage crowdfunding as a way to raise funds, raise awareness, and support for your project. And I get to do that with some awesome people, as depicted on the right. This is the team at ioby. That is just this diverse with talents and skills, but we're all equally committed to working with individuals who want to plan, fund, and implement positive projects in their community. And also to support issues that they care about. So that's a little bit about ioby. Also, I wanted to just point out that we are a not-for-profit crowdfunding platform. So just want to make sure that's clear as well. In addition, so I guess the fast facts about ioby, as depicted on this slide, some of the numbers. To date, we have raised over $6 million. We have worked with over 20,000 or trained over 20,000 neighborhood leaders, launched over 2,000 campaigns with the median donation size of $35. But I think what's not highlighted in this slide, because it can't be easily synthesized into a number, is the ripple effect that happens when we work with individuals and communities and the transformative change that happens at that time. So those are just our fast facts. And some more fast facts are we are a nationwide crowdfunding platform. So that means we work with all 50 states and not just those that are contiguous. Currently, we have 2 projects, one that's crowdfunding in Alaska, that is really dope project, and another one that is crowdfunding in Puerto Rico. But we offer more on-the-ground support in cities like Cleveland, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Memphis, where we have on-the-ground support to work with the leaders there. And so if you're interested in who we work with individuals, block associations, garden groups, unincorporated groups, unincorporated groups, artist collectives, small not-for-profits, local municipalities. But the 2 major points of, attention are that the project that you want to fundraise for is taking place in a neighborhood and that it has a public benefit. And from there, we could take it on, take the next step. And so aside from us being a not-for-profit crowdfunding platform, I think our sweet spot or our competitive edge is that you get to work with a person like myself, an actual live crowdfunding coach. You get each project a project leader is paired with a crowdfunding coach like myself, where we support you in helping you build your page, give you pointers on your compelling, to kind of tweaking your compelling story, how to build your team, how to strategize those asks. And we're your cheerleader and committed to supporting you run a successful campaign.
All right, awesome. Thank you for that background on ioby. And now we're going to turn it back to our panelists and just kick it off with some basic questions. I think it would be helpful. So we have a basic sense of each of your projects and what you're hoping to achieve or what you hope to achieve and what the problem was that you were hoping to solve. But I'm curious to hear from each of you, if you can talk a little bit more about like how you were hoping to use crowdfunding specifically to address that problem and why you decided to go with crowdfunding for the fundraising of your project. And why don't we start this time with Ben?
Sure. So the Summer in the City has some local corporate partners and smaller grants that we have had some success with, but the model is really like that it's a volunteer enterprise. So I'm a volunteer. The programming is run by primarily by like current college students. We were in college when we started it, and they get a stipend or the house where some of them live. But the I think part of it is that the real, like if you think of like the pie of all the resources, it's really the majority of it is people's time and energy and creativity and sweat equity, and then the dollars that can activate and sustain all of that. So with the Backpacktacular, I think we thought, well, people who are families of volunteers, who are alumni, who aren't in a position to like write a big check, or underwrite something, or want the to like sponsor it with their name or logo on it. This is I guess it doesn't get much more human scale than a backpack, right? There's something about it, like it. One, it's like even if you're in most, even today, as Summer in the City is really diverse and pulls from the whole metropolitan area, but the majority of the volunteers are from the suburbs, and as the name Summer in the City almost suggests in its subtext. So so even if you have not experienced poverty and living in a underserved, under-resourced area, I think there's something about that, the possibilities and the anxiety, or the stepping up of going back to school, that cuts across different tax brackets and city borders, and that you can, even if you have $10 or $20, you can feel like it went really specifically to something that you've lived through, and we've seen people respond in kind.
Awesome. Matt or Cappy, you want to chime in? Why crowdfunding?
I can go next. This is Cappy Collins. So I have very limited experience in running a nonprofit, but that's basically the way we operate, and we have finally incorporated. But the learning process along the way, one of the tips that I acquired was to be really cognizant of where your funding is coming from. And the rule of thumb that I learned, you can break it into either 3 or 4 categories depending on how nerdy you want to get. But funding can come from grants, so that could be private foundations or government. And then some people like to make a distinct category for corporate giving. So for-profit entities associated with companies, they also are a source. And then the other 2 are sales. So if you think about the Girl Scouts, what are they? They're really a cookie company, financially speaking. And then, of course, individual giving. And that tends to be the largest slice of a typical nonprofit's pie. For my organization, Cada Paso, we were only accessing one of those streams in terms of grants that we were getting. And we thought it was appropriate for us to try accessing one of those other streams. And ioby seemed like a good platform for us because of it being a mission-based organization, the same way we are a mission-based organization that really tries to focus on communities as the source of health and achievement.
Awesome. Matt, do you want to talk about the decision to use crowdfunding?
Sure. I guess just to add to what everybody else has said already, for me, I guess what I was really looking for wasn't just crowdfunding. It was a platform. It was a basis of experience. It was a team to work with, which felt really good about working with ioby. I guess when we started fundraising for the film, for the project, because I guess what's important to point out too is that the fundraising we did wasn't just for filmmaking. It was to actually get the researchers back on the ground to do the follow-up work to work they had done 15 years ago. Again, not to get too nerdy, but when it comes to researching insect species, you have to do constant repetition in sampling an environment because insect populations can change so much. And the federal funding in general for that sort of thing doesn't exist. People don't fund going out to collect bugs, to put it really simply. And so crowdfunding ended up doing what we needed to do, but more importantly for me, it was having that package that ioby offers, which is the platform, the not-for-profit status, the expertise, the help, the shoulder to cry on when you're crazy about stuff, all those sorts of things. So not that there was much crying, but a little bit.
There's always a little crying. It's part of it. Cool, thank you all. Okay, so this is a webinar on the power of photography and images. Why don't we kick it actually right back to Matt, and why don't you get started and tell us a little bit about how you use photography strategically to help raise money in your crowdfunding campaign. What was the
role? For us, it was pretty easy because that's what the project was. It was a film, right? So we were just capturing all this media. But that doesn't mean we necessarily could have used it well. I mean, you can take photos, you can film stuff with any camera you have. It's a matter of how well you use it. And I think, you know, for us, for any project, there are really two things. For any storytelling project, it's really important to think about two things. Is one, it's who's your audience, and then two, it's what's your unique voice that you're speaking with visually. And so, you know, for us, we knew that we were the way that we leveraged our photo. So the way I really conceived of this was, for those of you who know Patagonia as a company, I mean, they sell clothes, right? Like you can just kind of say they sell clothes, but man, they do sharp photography. Like you said, you were looking at some of my photos, Katie, and you were like, why am I sitting in an office? I look at a Patagonia, you know, catalog, and I'm like, why am I sitting here looking at a catalog? I should be climbing mountains. So it was that similar idea of taking the project we had, knowing the audience we wanted to go after, people who were interested in the outdoors, people who were interested in science, either as a profession or as just sort of a citizen scientist, and really being able to highlight that through the photos we did. And then telling it with a unique voice, which again is certainly a topic that we could really crawl down a few rabbit holes on. But the idea is that we could take snapshots, or we could tell a really unique story with framing choices and color choices and subject choices and depth of field choices that really spoke to the audience we wanted to hit at. And again, a lot of that came through what we just wanted to do with the film. So that it was all part of what we were doing anyway. But my two bits of advice to folks is really to start thinking about that. Who are you going after? And what sort of unique voice do you want to speak to them with? How are your photos? How is your story? How are your word choices going to stand out to people and not just be another sort of like blah, 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 blah that people can ignore?
Yeah, that's great. All right, Cappy, do you want to talk a little bit about the use of photography strategically in your project? Have you used it?
Sure. Yeah, you know, I try to take an evidence-based approach to projects when I have the time to actually go that way. Our Cada Paso program is meant to be an evidence-based and evidence-generating program. We want to move forward in the direction that we understand is the best way to go, and then evaluate to see if it's actually working. So in the same way with our publicity and fundraising efforts, there is some literature out there on how to use imagery to make money. One interesting study, I don't remember the name of the organization, but it was one of those global hunger organizations that has ads on TV. They tried 3 different versions of their ad. One with one face of one starving child on screen for the majority of the segment. Another version had the child and his sister together on screen. And then a third had a shot of the whole village, all suffering from hunger on the screen. Now, if you use your intellectual brain, you say, oh, well, if there are more people on screen, obviously the need is greater. And you might think that would be the more powerful or compelling ad, but the image with one child's face generated the most money, the most calls during the time it was on the air, indicating that there is a bias we have in our human brains to connect with individual faces more than we're able to connect with problems that are presented as being larger. So that magnitude may actually hinder our engagement with the issue. So since then, we've started using individual faces, or the example you might have seen earlier was two girls. You know, I break the rules sometimes, but we are trying to limit it down to fewer numbers of powerful images of, you know, individuals, rather than trying to show a large number of images with large numbers of people. And we actually have sort of a natural experiment going on with a grant that we applied for, using a crowdsourced image for the thumbnail instead of those two girls this time around. We did not receive the grant last time. We're going to see if we receive the grant this time, even though it's essentially the same application.
Little scientific method there.
A little bit. It's mostly anecdotal, but we'll pretend it's science.
Okay. Cool. Ben, do you want to talk about your strategy when it comes to photography and use of it in fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can segue, I think, dovetail on what Cappy was saying, where one of the pictures you saw earlier, I don't know if you have the, if you wanted to like run back through our pictures, not that we don't look great, everybody looks great. So I just call it the big picture, right? I mean, the first one we did, and so subsequent to this one, the one that's like taken from, yeah, this is, it sort of looks like it's from up in the sky. It's just from the top of a pretty tall A-frame, A-shaped ladder, where you know, we've done one of these every year, even before we really had any idea we were doing the first year. Maybe the first 2 years it was like just with a disposable camera, you know, 2002, 2003. There were digital cameras. I just don't know that anybody had one at that point. And so, but like the big picture, where you sort of get a sense of like the scale of it, and you know, the combination or the juxtaposition of the mural or work in progress or one angle of it, and then everybody all together. Sometimes we try and like everyone like sit in the shape of something, which is stressful. I don't necessarily recommend. And then couple. So that, I think that's like the village, sort of like Cappy was saying. Like there's something like the scale of it, like, oh, that's a lot of people in one place and at the same time. I won't digress, but I just listened to this long podcast about Woodstock '99, and like makes me appreciate when large groups of people don't destroy festivals and whatever else. So but absolutely, like the individual, right, that smile or that moment. I mean, I tend to think candid pictures or like quasi-candid pictures really pop even more now that we're like so used to selfies and smiles and like arm around each other's shoulders. Like if you can sort of like have that like a moment that right, that we have our big rainbow parachute, and always try and get a lot of fun under the parachute pictures. That one is very close up and pretty candid. That having them getting to like be right there, be sort of in that moment. Again, if whether you're a parent of one of the bigger kids involved or used to volunteer with us a few years ago, and kind of bring you there into the moment, into the action.
Awesome. Great. So I want to get a little bit more, we're not going to get like super technical here, but I want to get a little bit more into kind of specific tips and best practices for taking great photos. I don't know if folks want to talk about like what kind of camera you use. Do you need a fancy camera? Can you just use your phone? Is that okay? How do you make sure that like the action stops long enough to get photos of people? How do you get people's faces in there if they're doing stuff? Like we just work with like—
Can I start this one?
Yeah.
As a non-professional photographer, my strategy is quantity, and then find the one good photo in the thousands that you take.
And what do you shoot on, Cappy? Do you just use a phone, or do you have a dedicated
I
camera?
do have an SLR digital camera, so the resolution will be there for the photo that happens to be in focus and captured the right moment. But I just keep the finger going on the trigger until I get home and I'm like, oh, finally, there's one, I got one, yay! It's a good expedition.
Yeah, I mean, this is something where, again, most of the people who are like on the ground are like indigenous smartphone age, participants and program leads, right? Because they're 20 now and they've had access to that technology since forever. And so one of the things that I have to like really push for is like, take 1,000,000 pictures, like just like take and be like, and I have 2 small kids, so I'm like, you like be like dad mode, like get up in their face or angles, or would just be obnoxious, be annoying. It's endearing, it's fine, it's okay. And I mean, I have a camera, but mostly I take pictures with my phone. Certainly, I'd say the big difference with if you're using your phone is like the outdoors, a phone picture can pass for a real camera picture, but indoors it doesn't really carry. Like the light, you just don't have enough lighting. You're not going to have that like crispness, that moment. So I think most of the time you can get, if you're sort of getting volume, you'll get the few good ones. And like, if you have a friend who likes to take pictures, blackmail her or him, and they'll come and hopefully his name is literally Simon Schuster, so that's something. Who he lives in East Lansing now and is a busy guy, but I get him back make sure he's got our finale Friday on the calendar, and he brings his like really, really nice camera and takes a lot of pictures that we get a lot of mileage out of.
Yeah, I agree with what both Cappy and Ben said. Shoot, just keep the trigger going. And that's actually the benefit of using a digital camera is, when you only had like 36 images on an analog roll, you had to be like anal about every single shot, especially if you were like in the middle of a desert and you were not going to get back there to get a shot, right? But now you can just shoot. But saying that, make sure that when you do that, you have a system and a workflow for keeping those photos. Make sure that they don't just get lost, because you can shoot 1,000,000 photos, but if you don't have the time to go back through them, or you don't know where you stored them, you wasted time, right? So make sure that you build it into your workflow, which again, like Ben said, if you have someone who can be dedicated to that, extremely helpful, super helpful for that. I will caution on your smartphone, zoom with your feet, not with the digital zoom, because you're going to end up getting really, I hope I can say this on an ioby webinar, crappy photos. So I would just say, and that actually is one thing to consider, is like good photos can do you a lot of good. Bad photos could actually kind of harm you a little bit, especially in today's era when good photos are so easy to come by. So that's something to consider. You also kind of want to be thoughtful about the photos you're getting, because if all you get are close-ups, you're not going to be able to tell as comprehensive of a story. Basic story structure, like when I write a story, sort of evolves as you always want to lead with introducing people to the who or what or where that you're talking about. Like, give them a sense of who, give them a sense of what, give them a sense of place, right? And then the next step is to clarify why it's important that they need to pay attention to that. And then you do the deep dive into all the explanation, whatever else needs to go into like 2,000 word story, right? So think about your photos the same way. Are you establishing? Are you orienting people to who you're talking about? Are you orienting people to what you're talking about? And just as importantly, are you orienting people to where you're talking about? You know, creating a sense of place is really important. I would imagine, you know, our fundraising campaign was national. So establishing a sense of place was important because people may be unfamiliar with it. Whereas on local projects, it might be really important to establish that you are local, that you really do know your place in your space. And that's where you get the buy-in from supporters to want to contribute to your project. And then the other thing I would say, and this is always something fun, because I don't think Katie said it. I think you said, how do you get people to stand still and take a photo? Yes, and I would also say that if everything is in motion as part of your project, that's what you want to capture. Capture the motion. If photos are blurry because kids are running around and playing and they're under the, you know, like parachute and they're like, oh, I got my backpack, where's my backpack? Then capture that. That's what you want to capture. Actually capture the blurriness against the still background. Don't feel like you have to capture the kids in a sync. Stop moving, you're kids. Okay, now go. You know, it's like capture them as they are. So.
Matt mentioned zooming with your feet, which I think is great advice, not just for the technical reason, but also so that you're thinking about capturing the close-ups and the far away shots. I'll build on that by saying, move your feet so the sun is at your back, because that'll ruin so many shots if you're shooting into the light. Make sure your subject is getting the light and you're capturing that with the sun at your back.
And check your phone settings so that it's like getting the maximum resolution that it will, however many megapixels, and that you have enough space on your phone. You don't want to be like, I have to go and like delete some app or some old videos that I have room to take. You know, you don't like anticipate the moment. I call it, a phrase I use a lot is like plan to spontaneity, right? Like you don't know exactly what's going to happen. I certainly don't, but like you're sort of ready in that, like the way that like improv comedy teams can sort of anticipate what's coming and how their teammates and others are going to respond to these exciting scenarios.
You know, two more things I would throw in is video is just as easy these days. I mean, you can do it on your phone. And there's some, you know, like I have an iPhone, so, you know, the camera app on that's decent, but you can download another app for like $5 that actually turns your camera into a really comprehensive video camera that you can do. Some of the filming I did in the monument and some of the filming I do for other projects, I just pull my phone out and I film with that as I have my other cameras running. It just makes it really easy. I would definitely build video into your workflow too as you capture stuff, because it's super easy. And at some point you're going to go, oh, I wish I had a video of that. And what I typically do is when I shoot a video of something, I then shoot a whole bunch of stills right after it, or vice versa. So I'm capturing whatever it is I want in both formats so I can use them however I want. I had one more thing and I don't know where it went, so I'll come back to it when I get a second.
All right, thanks. Let us know when it comes back. I want to bring Farrah into the conversation as well. So for folks who weren't at the beginning of the webinar, Farrah is one of our success strategists on staff who works with folks like Matt and Cappy and Ben to help their fundraising campaigns be successful. Farrah coaches a lot of folks on storytelling and how that kind of builds into creating a narrative that your audience wants to buy into and that your supporters want to buy into. I want to ask you, Farrah, kind of what role do images play in the kind of storytelling that you teach people how to do, or what do you coach people to do when it comes to like adding images to their project page, or capturing photos of their project being implemented? Just like what do you tell people to do?
I'm probably going to echo a lot of what's been shared, but the first thing that I want to echo is think about your audience. Think about who will be seeing this page and what image or images would resonate with them. So that's the first thing, thinking about who's on the other side of that screen. And then the other part is authenticity, right? So oftentimes I'll be working with project leaders who think they have to create like a photo shoot or get something that's super polished, or have a graphic artist work on an image that needs to be uploaded. But in actuality, the authenticity is what would create more of the compelling image. So speaking from an authentic place, thinking about who will be viewing the page or the potential audience of the page, are the two main things that I offer as pointers and tips to help guide people in the right direction.
Cool. I want to invite our panelists now to ask any questions that you have for each other or vice versa, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So folks, if you're attendees and you have a question for any of our panelists, please type it into the box and we'll get to as many of them as we possibly can. But first, questions for each other?
I like everything everybody said. Your guys' projects are fascinating, so the images are great.
I gotcha.
Okay, I have a question. This is kind of like a what if question. So the three of you have like particularly visual projects, I would say. There's like awesome things to take pictures of. As Farrah knows, a lot of the, not a lot, some of the projects that we work with are like primarily indoors, or primarily like not all in one day when everyone's painting a mural, or like not in a beautiful national park, you know? So I'm wondering if, Farrah, if you have thoughts about like what to tell people who might not think of their project as being super visual, or if the three of you have ideas, if you have worked on other projects that you've thought of as not visual, like how do you get around that?
I think I want to let the panelists go first.
Well, I can say this. If you're excited about your project, you're seeing something that's pretty cool there, and that goes back to capturing with a unique voice. I mean, let's just kind of take the example you gave. Let's say, I don't know, you're painting a small mural on a wall in a school inside, right? Well, I mean, there's a ton of cool stuff you can capture with that, right? Like if you just sit there and think about how do I take a picture of a wall? Okay, well, I'm bored now too, so let's not do that. What can you take a picture of? You take a picture of opening the cans of paint. You take a picture of going to buy the paint. You take a picture of a kid's face right over the top of the paint as they look into it. You know, you can capture all of these different things. A close-up of the brush on the wall as it takes strokes. All sorts of fun stuff you could do. So it really goes back to, if you're excited about this project, you're seeing something, how do you capture what you're seeing to share with other people? Which gets me back to what the point that I forgot before, which is I would also highly encourage people to identify examples of photography and visual storytelling that you like, and use that as sort of a template to emulate stuff. You know, I use the Patagonia example, right? So how do I tell the story of going out and catching bees through a very similar vibe? I have a huge body of work I can look at from this company to get pointers, and how do they frame stuff, and how do they make color choices, and how do they put people, really tiny people, in these huge spaces to give a sense of place.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, well, one thought is like the picture, sometimes like the compelling picture is like the before picture, right? Is the like, this is the unacceptable status quo of this like litter strewn lot on, you know, what some people think is the wrong side of the tracks, but where you have, you know, equity and engagement that's going to turn it around. So it can, you know, that like, this is, you know, we now have like I'll do a little plug for Airtable, which is a cool, very like user-friendly database. And one of the things we use it for is for the murals. And like I'm just as focused on getting like the before picture and like the sort of the work in progress picture and the after picture. So you want sort of that, especially with crowdfunding, where you're reaching out to people early on or midway. You know, if it's over, like, what are you asking me for money for, right? Like I want to see, I want to be able to anticipate the good, but also see sort of where that need is. The thing that comes to mind with the like challenge of it is I always have when we were doing gardening projects, like make sure the pictures don't look like punishment. Like they're like, this is like the other kind of community service where you've done something and you're paying your debt to society. Or it's like this, you know, so like that can be a matter of you know, yeah, having a playful approach, or you know, making sure it's not like it's at an angle where it seems like it's lively, it's social, which you know, hopefully it is.
I would also like to add, you know, if it's a situation where the project is indoors, maybe it's dealing with data or writing to a great extent, which are not inherently visual tasks. It is helpful, and this comes up when I'm working with students who may have to present, let's say, an academic poster at a conference, and they're doing research. Find the photo, make the effort to get some image in there, even if it's not about people doing exciting things outdoors. There are people involved in doing the project itself. So if it's as simple as having a shot of the team, and you can do that outdoors after the work is done, even, you can put that in there, and all of a sudden the poster gets a lot more attention when people are strolling by because they see faces. It's almost like cheating to use people's faces. You get instant engagement that way. So I think it's worth the effort to get a photo in there. I've even had people just capture a Google Street View image off their screen and put it in there to show the site at which something happened if they didn't have a photo already at hand. So just something that's visual can really engage the person, the audience who's supposed to be having an experience with that information.
I mean, the Google Street View is great. Like we use for like those before pictures. I was about to say to caution against, you know, like Google image search and stock photos, because they're, I mean, I do this sometimes. Like you can, you know, at any picture you can like right click on it and say like search for this image, and then you'll see, oh, this is like from Getty Images or from iStock Photo or from something in Canada that you just like stole it from. And you know, that can be a place to like look for ideas and inspiration, but like you want your own, even if it's not, you know, Ansel Adams's picture of the great wide open out west. It's, you want your own.
I would endorse what Ben says for two reasons. One, of course, you don't want to be stealing content, so you know, make sure to attribute whenever you do have an image that's not your own. But also, I really caution against stock photos, even if you do own them, just because they look very much like stock photos, and it actually, I think, puts a little distance between the viewer and the project because it seems very impersonal and generic.
One other thing I'd add is thinking about as we take these photos, you also want to be very thoughtful about presenting the photos, right? And if you are taking lots and lots and lots of photos, one of the hardest things in storytelling, so one of the things they say about storytelling, like filmmaking, is 75% of the stuff you film, 80% of the stuff will be on the cutting room floor. Like you're not going to use the majority of stuff. And that could be just because it's bad stuff. I mean, there's that aspect. But this really gets into the storytelling component. Is you may like have some awesome photos that don't actually fit the story you're trying to tell. Don't just jam them in because you like the photos. Make sure that you're using your photos to tell the story that you want to tell, which can be really hard to do. But if you really like the photo, just frame it and put it on your wall. You know, it's like it doesn't have to go into the story that you're telling. But also be thoughtful about when you bring these photos out. So, you know, like on ioby, you can post updates, and you should be posting updates so that you keep people informed. Plan out your story arc. You know, you don't have to do just like a giant photo dump. Like I took 100 photos this week and here they are. Isn't it awesome? It's like pick your 20 favorite and then plan 20 blog posts for people. You're going to get a ton of mileage out of that. I mean, a couple paragraphs and one photo is all you have to do, and that's a winner. Like that's because it's just to keep people updated, just keep people hooked. They know they're going to need to be coming back for more. So, you know, plan out how you want to arc this. And I really like what both Ben and Cappy have been saying about this idea of capturing the before and after, the sense of place. you know, if you're going to do a before and after, plan out 20 weeks of showing the before all the way arcing through the after, you know, so you have this whole story. It's just a neat way to start thinking about it.
Great. Okay, so we have a question from the audience that is touching on the idea of using close-ups of faces. The question asker talks about that being like also a best practice in social media, that you know, with social media, there's always a tip to show faces to kind of build empathy. But she's worried that just by showing close-ups all the time, it kind of loses the storytelling part. I wonder if any of you have encountered this or have thoughts about like the balance of, you know, close-ups, the kind of like looking into people's eyes, building empathy, and then like pictures that actually show what is actually happening, that kind of larger picture. Which, like, what kind is more effective, and how do you kind of balance the two? Or Farrah, if you have like other people's campaigns
Oh
that
yeah,
you've.
go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, Farrah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
So the quick thing I was going to say is the answer isn't to show a certain type of photo. The answer is to tell a story, right? Like that's the thing. So if your story is arcing through a series of close-ups, which shows, I don't know, like a variety of different kids doing a variety of different things, okay, that's cool. Then do that. If the idea is to show the Backpacktacular and the kids involved with that, then you're going to do some close-ups to connect with the kids, but you're probably going to do some close-ups on the backpack too, or you're going to do a close-ups on things, you know, in the backpack, and you're going to do, man, if you had a drone shot and you could like capture the parachute with all the kids around it, creating a sense of place, right? Like, so think of it as texture. I mean, I don't know, it's like eating a meal. I mean, some people like to have the same thing filling their plate 7 days in a row, but not me. You like a little texture to your food. So, you know, think about that with your storytelling too. It's not about showing a certain type of picture. It's about telling a story.
And just to kind of add to that, thought should be something that is always helping you decide what image to select to add onto your campaign page. It's not like, oh, the statistics say that doing close-ups is what works. What is that the only thought? You just want to just use statistics? Like, kind of like having a thoughtful way of approaching the images that you use to tell this story is truly important. So sometimes it is having those difficult conversations with project leaders, because they are really committed to an image, and then I'm like, okay, so what will this convey? What emotion are you seeking from individuals who see this? But having that discussion is usually what happens, and then they might add it as an update, or after they successfully crowdfund, and then they include it as like a final image or what have you. But just being mindful in the process is truly important.
And I don't know, this is like something I do almost reflexively, is like, you know, in a picture is like, that's like the picture that you take with whatever dimensions, like that's like it's like your lump of clay in some ways, right? And like if it's high enough resolution, you can crop it to focus on a specific part of what's happening. That doesn't mean just you want all pictures from far away, because you only can ever get so much detail. But that can be a really cool way to do it, is like if you've got like, right, the big scene with whatever's in the background, and you take a lot of those, and then you can like go and like hunt around, especially with like, if you're using it for digital stuff, it doesn't need to be 300 dots per inch of resolution, right? Like you can have those like images within the image that sort of and you know, thinking like in terms of albums sometimes, right? Like you can usually keep people's attention to flip through, and the order that you put them in, and can give people that, right, like the close up, like you're right in it, and the like, oh, okay, I can like see sort of the broader context of what's happening.
And just something I wanted to share briefly, sorry, about like those projects that may not necessarily take place outdoors and are happening, like their meetings or town hall type crowdfunding projects. Think of iconic symbols or images that can convey that same message. Like there's a project that crowdfunds with us that it does translation services. They raise funds for translation service. And the image that they use is the iconic picture of Lady Liberty, right? So it's kind of, well, maybe showing someone translating a document may not be as compelling, but seeing an image of Lady Liberty conveys a story that is broader than just the translation service.
What Farrah just said echoes what Matt mentioned about finding the right image for the story you're trying to tell. And then also thinking about Ben's work, you know, that photo of the crowd with all of the colors and the magnitude of people and the echoed imagery and the murals behind. I would mention thinking about the context in which the photo is being used. If you have a chance to use just one photo, pretend this was a blown up photo that was put on a mural inside a room and you're in that room. Ben's photo would be immersive. That would be really powerful to feel like you're part of that entire scene because it's so big. But if the photo is being used because it's your social media avatar, you know, when it's shrunk down to this big, you're not going to be able to appreciate anything of that photo. So you might want to go with a single face. Again, cut to the shortcut of cheating for the purpose of engaging a user immediately. So just you know, make a decision based on what the purpose of the project is.
All right.
Cappy, it's never cheating, it's creative problem solving.
Awesome. All right, I think that is a fantastic note to wrap up on, and I want to be respectful of everyone's Monday afternoon, and we're just about at 2 Eastern time. So thank you, a huge thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your expertise and your stories with us, and to Farah as well. We have a number of questions from the audience that we weren't able to get to, so we will be in touch. If you asked a question, I'll be in touch. I'll just shoot you an email. We have all of your contact information and we'll make sure that we get that answered for you. In the meantime, though, if you have a project idea, you want to find out more about ioby, you want to ask us, you know, about our services or our platform or anything like that, you can go to ioby.org if you want to tell us your idea right away, ioby.org/idea. If you haven't already signed up for our email newsletter, ioby.org, you can do that. And that's the best way to find out about future webinars that we have. I mentioned we have a bunch coming up in 2020, but before that, in November, our next webinar will be about the power of the press and using the press and how to get media attention for your crowdfunding campaign, which is another tactic that a few of our ioby project leaders have been very successful. So make sure to join us for that one. Follow us on social media, give us a shout, and again, tell us your project ideas. Also, ioby.org/resources. We have a wealth of information from project leaders like these three who have generously shared their experiences and expertise in anything from photography to press and the media to organizing to fundraising, of course, because that's what our focus is. So check us out, make sure to join us for future webinars. And again, if you asked a question, I will be in touch with you if it was not answered on this webinar. So thank you again so much to our panelists. I hope you have a great Monday afternoon, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.